Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Our final guest tonight is Representative Jody Barrett from the 69th District. He's got some good legislation planned for the upcoming session to include dealing with illegal aliens. Thanks for being with us, and how are you tonight? And thanks thanks for not bending the knee on the vouchers, by the way.
Well, thank you. That was a tough vote for a lot of us that have these rural districts, and just happy to have gotten a lot of feedback from home that made it easy for me to make that decision.
Yeah. Before we get into your legislation, you do have some good stuff lined up. Is there anything, I know you've been on a couple of shows, anything you want to say about the vouchers or the special session? Any thoughts?
No, I mean, I think we probably beat that horse to death quite a bit. And, in my line of work as a lawyer, I'm kind of trained to move on to the next fight once the other one's over. Yeah. I will say this. I know I've got several friends in districts that are similar to mine, that are rural districts, that probably taking a beating back home just because of this vote. Now, I hope that their voters and their friends and their supporters will look at the totality of the circumstances and the overall voting records of these guys, and not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because I've been on the receiving end of that. Obviously, 2 years ago with the expulsion vote, I caught a little bit of flack over a decision that I made that I felt that was right under the circumstances. And so, I've got some good friends that are, maybe taking a little bit of heat and not feeling real good about themselves right now. But I'm hopeful that the folks will give them some reprieve, because in the next week or two, we'll be right back to voting on things that I think that are conservative, that everybody's going to be on the same page about.
Yeah, actually, that's what's really more frustrating about it, is there are some good people that voted for that. I don't think they had good reasons necessarily, or I don't agree with their reasons, but some of those people are solid on other things.
Sure. Well, I mean, even somebody. Yeah, I mean, even somebody like Kirk Haston that has a very rural district and is a public school teacher for his entire career, he had a completely different take on it and a different perspective than I had. And he's got some really compelling reasons why he voted the way he voted. So, I think all of the voters are going to have to just have those communications and conversations with the reps that represent them. And if they're not happy with the way they voted, then hopefully hear them out, and they'll be able to have an opportunity to explain why they did the way they did. But for me, I've already started that. I've had a couple of meetings with school boards already. We had the legislative review dinner with Dixon County's school board just last week, and it probably spent 45 minutes to an hour kind of getting peppered with questions from folks there that work in the administration. And that was a good process, and it was good to start having those conversations now. And, I think they're already turning the page and saying, all right, we're going to see this as a challenge, that we're going to step up our game here in Dixon County Public Schools and try to make sure that we make it to where nobody ever wants to leave. And that's a great attitude to have.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I second your opinion, and not everybody that voted for the vouchers needs to be thrown out by any means. There are some good ones. And then I think most people that pay attention, they know the ones who have calluses on their knees. Okay, we'll put it that way, versus the ones who may have a bad vote on this, even for a bad reason. And then, as you said, there's other people that do have different takes on it. So, but I do appreciate you. I know you spoke out about the process prior to, the way this was all lumped together, and I think everybody is irritated with that, and I think that's probably one of the things that's more irritating to some degree, even than the legislation, was how it was lumped in with other things that it shouldn't have been lumped in, and shouldn't have been a special session, really.
Well, yeah, I definitely think the special sessions have gotten to where they're not so special anymore, and that's a sad thing for our state. We really need to get back to the point of doing business in the regular course of business through a regular session, where bills get fully vetted everybody gets an opportunity to chime in. Everybody gets enough time to do their research and hear from their folks back home. But doing these things in 3 or 4 days for a special session, that doesn't need to be the regular course of business for Tennessee.
Yeah, and I hate to, the last thing I'll say is maybe we need legislation to give a legal definition to extraordinary, as in the circumstances for calling one. We can't just have governor tantrum sessions, and I think we've had a couple of those. But anyway, we'll move on to the next thing. Hey, I've looked over your legislation, and I think you got some good stuff there. I definitely am interested in your bill that deals with emergency powers of the governor. And if you don't mind, let's kind of start with that one.
Oh yeah, that's something that's been worked on for the last couple of years. I'm working with the Tennessee Freedom Initiative, and we tried this bill last year, had a different House sponsor last year, and ran into some trouble, I think, in the Senate. So they're bringing it back around. They feel like they've got things worked out in the Senate, and this is very important to, as we've come out of COVID, we've learned that the emergency powers that the governor has is a little bit too broad. It gives the way the language of that code is written, it gives the governor the authority to really step on constitutional individual rights and freedoms that are protected under the Tennessee Constitution, and we need to make sure that we at least rein that in, that there's no, or at least very limited, narrow circumstances where the governor has the ability to get into those areas of the law and overstep. So, and also make sure that that's limited in time. So this bill is important, and it's timely based on what we've been through over the last 4 or 5 years.
Absolutely. Well, Declaration of Rights is right up front in the Tennessee Constitution, and it states right up front that these rights, they're off limits. They're off limits to the General Assembly, and it reiterates that later on. I want to say Article 11, Section 16, or something like that, and it basically says again that the rights, the Declaration of Rights, are not to be violated under any pretext whatsoever. That's pretty cut and dry,
100%. I mean, and that's the thing, that just because an emergency is declared, that doesn't wave some magic wand that means all of our rights that are protected under the Constitution now are somehow in jeopardy or waivable. And the other thing, too, that I want to say about this is I want to make sure that we're not singling out this particular governor. He's only going to be in office for 2 more years, and we don't know who's going to be there after that, or 4 years later and 20 years later. And so when we're dealing with this statute and trying to make sure that we narrow up these powers that a governor has, we're keeping in mind worst case scenario down the road. What happens when somebody from another party or a completely different ideology that we don't agree with, that is much more inclined to step on these rights? We want to make sure that we're tightening this up so it doesn't get taken advantage of down the road.
What were the arguments against it in the Senate last year? Do you recall?
I don't recall exactly. I didn't watch that debate, but my understanding is that there was just a general maybe queasiness of trying to lump things in under and making this governor feel like he was being attacked or reined in. And again, that's why I stress this is not about Governor Lee. This is about anybody that's in that position down the road. Is if we end up dealing with another circumstance like we had similar to COVID or something along those lines, people need to be able to go worship. They need to be able to go to work. Things that we have constitutional rights being protected. We're not waiving those just because there's a governor that's declared that there's a state of emergency.
Right. Yeah, I know that because he was the governor during COVID, and a lot of people, myself included, are irritated with how things went, but I get a little bit irritated, and I understand from a political point there to a degree, but this idea that the legislature has to tiptoe around the governor and we don't want him to feel bad. Well, that guy violated the Constitution, and he kept extending the emergency orders so that we could keep the federal money coming. I think that I think a lot of your partners up there need to read the Tennessee Constitution, because I'm pretty sure most of them hadn't read it. And if they have read it, they don't seem to care much about it, because our governor is not designed, as you know, to be a strong governor. The legislature is supposed to reign supreme in Tennessee.
Well, and I'll comment about this similar to the way I commented about the school choice vote. A lot of good people made some bad decisions during that time period, and it's a matter of how quickly they figured out that they were doing the wrong thing and turned it around. And so, I'm as pro-Trump as the next guy, but not everything he did during COVID was the right thing.
Absolutely agree.
So hopefully we've all learned from that mistake and those issues where we did things the wrong way or we overreacted. And this piece of legislation will hopefully make it where there's a little bit more thought and time put or energy put into making sure we're making smart decisions rather than making quick decisions.
Right. Now, I noticed one thing about the legislation. The legislation that we're operating under during COVID was written right after 9/11, but really, if you read it, it seemed to be more geared towards some sort of natural disaster.
Right.
And so is this bill going to be a little more versatile, or, I mean, how is it going to be structured different to where you, regardless of what the emergency is, number one, you still stay within the confines of the Constitution, but it's not structured just for one type of emergency?
Right. We're not dealing with just natural disasters, which obviously we've dealt with some of that over in East Tennessee with the floods. We're always going to have situations with tornadoes and flooding, heaven forbid, an earthquake or something along those lines. But also what we saw with COVID is these are issues that are going to pop up that are outside of Mother Nature. Things that are infecting the entire state or large quantities of the state, large portions that are going to require the governor to step in, declare a state of emergency to be able to implement some of the relief efforts that are available under those types of declarations. We just want to make sure that when that is done, that individual constitutional rights are not being waived or overstepped at that point.
Right. Okay, well, that's definitely a good bill, and definitely needed. I noticed you had a bill dealing with obscenity, and I think that was House Bill 221, I think.
Well, there are two bills, 221 and 222, that are very similar in nature. I've been working on those bills with American Family Action out of Tupelo, Mississippi. The 221 is a civil obscenity right that I worked on last year, and actually I had 74 House co-sponsors on that bill last year. Flew through the House, and then on the Senate side, there was some stuff that kind of got monkeyed around with the language a little bit, and I just could not agree to conform to the Senate version of that bill because one of the one word that got changed really kind of gutted the intent of the bill. So we ended up going to conference last year on it and just could not come to an agreement. So I brought that bill back, and what it does is it creates a civil right of action for anyone to sue a commercial entity that is distributing, producing, delivering obscene materials into the state of Tennessee. And the real hang-up, I think, is the definition of obscenity and what that is, which we have a definition, legal definition through the Supreme Court that's referenced in our obscenity criminal statute that we have. And all I'm doing is adding a paragraph under that criminal statute that says not only can you have someone prosecuted if they violate these things in Tennessee, it also is a civil right if there's any violation of what's defined in that term. And so now, instead of a father of a daughter that's had her picture distributed around the internet, instead of him having to wait for a district attorney to file criminal charges, go to the grand jury, and get a criminal conviction, they will be able to hire their own attorney and go after that entity through a civil action and try to get injunctive relief, get the pictures or photos taken down, or also get damages if they can prove that in the court system.
Okay, now, but obscenity,
yes,
that can be other things as well. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody doing the Photoshop thing with a teenage girl or whatever.
Right. And that's the real thing here too is there's a distinct difference in the law between obscene materials and pornography. Pornography is protected by the First Amendment. Well, obscene materials or obscenity is not protected by the First Amendment. And you're talking about the worst of the worst stuff. Child pornography. Really, really hardcore stuff that nobody should be looking at or producing or transmitting into the state of Tennessee. And what we're trying to do with this bill is just add another reason or incentive for these folks that do distribute those obscene materials, another reason for them not to be doing business here in Tennessee.
So I know that there's been a couple bills in the last few years having to deal with dealing with obscenity in the schools. I think the year before last one was passed, and I think they may have done one last year or attempted to do one. It may have been yours, I'm not sure. But on the whole obscenity thing, and I had this discussion with my senator, who's also a lawyer of sorts, and was basically told the law was not enforceable. This was a law that Susan Lynn was the sponsor of 2 years ago, I think it was. That it wasn't.
I co-sponsored that bill with Susan Lynn.
Oh, okay. So you're familiar with it. Great. So he told me, well, it's not enforceable because of the Miller test, because the Supreme Court says we have to use the Miller test in determining obscenity. And even though there is some leeway from state to state, community to community or whatever, you still have to apply the Miller test to make that determination if it's obscene. And that basically the prosecutors in the counties, the sheriffs were not going to come in and make an arrest, and the prosecutors weren't going to prosecute.
And that's exactly why we need the civil right of action. These cases are very difficult for a district attorney to get a conviction on. First of all, they're difficult to identify. They're difficult to define, as you said, by the Miller test, what is or is not obscenity, because there's somewhat of a subjective measure to that. That's why we need the ability for Tennesseans to be able to protect themselves and take the law into their own hands, per se, by going to the court to seek relief. They still have to be able to prove their case. They have to have enough of a case and enough facts to support what they are claiming in order to get past summary judgment motion. So this is not a situation where we're just opening the door to create a bunch of frivolous lawsuits. Lawyers are still going to have to survive what's called Rule 11 sanctions, to where they are not bringing cases to the court that are not worthy of the court's time. And so this is just making it more accessible for Tennesseans to be able to defend themselves, defend their family members, and to try to make sure that the folks that are taking advantage of young people, taking advantage of children, that they have real reason to be concerned about doing that type of behavior in the state of Tennessee.
So for the civil case, do they have to use the Miller test?
It's still going to be the same Supreme Court test to determine whether or not something is obscene, but the burden of proof that you have in a civil case is different than it would be in a criminal case. So in a criminal case, just like we saw during the OJ trial, he did not get convicted of the crime of murder, but there was a civil action that he got had a very hefty judgment given against him. And so we don't have to go to beyond a reasonable doubt with the evidence in order to get a civil case or a civil conviction or civil judgment. So in the civil case, it's just a preponderance of the evidence that you can show that, hey, they have actually violated these things that are listed in the criminal statute, but the level of proof that you have to bring is at a lower standard. And so, again, it makes it much easier for folks to be able to defend themselves and take care of their family.
It's a lower standard, but it does or does not use the Miller test, just so I'm straight on that.
So again, the Miller test is still going to be part of the equation of trying to establish that what you are filing your complaint about is actually obscene materials, and that's going to be part of the nature of the civil case. Is when I sue someone that says you have violated the the criminal obscenity statute in Tennessee, I'm going to be saying that the materials that you are distributing are obscene and based on an analysis under the Miller test. So any complaint that I file, any brief that I file to support that complaint is going to have that legal analysis included.
Okay. All right, now another question. So it said commercial. So that could include if a commercial entity, so if that stuff ends up in the school, who's responsible? Isn't the school responsible if that stuff ends up there, or does that go back to the whole, are we back square one with the Miller test?
No, what we're talking about with this statute in particular, dealing with commercial entities, we're talking about the folks that are actually profiting off of this material. Now we did take out the carriers. There's an exclusion in the bill so that we're not going after Google or AT&T or Comcast, whoever your service provider is. We're going after the people that are actually running these websites, that are going out and gathering, paying for these materials to put on their website, and then, or even if not a website, into their books or their magazines or whatever it is, their hardcore or their hard materials, and delivering those into our Tennessee communities, into our cities and towns, or whether that be physical or through the internet. And those are the folks that are trying to make a profit off of this, and that's why we say commercial entity. And so what we want to do is take away the profitability and make it where, just like we did with the age verification law that caused Pornhub to pull out of Tennessee, with laws like this, when we get these on the books, we want these other seedier level of players in the market to realize that this is not a place where you can mess around. You're going to end up losing far more than you could ever make a profit off of if you get hit with one of these suits in Tennessee.
But so let's say a parent sues, and if they lose the case, then they're going to have to pay for the other guy's bills, correct?
Not necessarily. I mean, just the only way that a plaintiff is going to have to pay for court costs or attorney's fees is if there is some sort of Rule 11 motion or sanction that is issued by the court that determines that it was a frivolous case. If you've got an actual legitimate case and you lose, that you're typically not going to have to pay court costs and attorney's fees for somebody to defend that. That's just going to be the cost of defense that these companies are going to have to build in.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I understand the intent to a degree, but it seems, I hate the fact. The Miller test, I don't think that's anywhere in here. I don't think I could find that anywhere. I know it's not in Article 3, Section 2. I know it's nowhere in here. And it just irritates me to no end that the Supreme Court does something, oh, by the way, they may change their mind in the next case, but we're going to just adhere to that, and we can't even enforce, and I'm not mad at you, I'm just mad, okay?
I understand.
We just can't enforce our own standard in our state of what obscenity or pornography is. That to me is just ridiculous, but I appreciate you trying to do something.
Well, my hope would be, Dave, with this statute and with this civil right of action, that we open the door for the courts to start hearing these cases and start establishing a precedent that will go forward. Right now, there's a bar to Tennesseans to bring civil cases against these folks. With this statute, once it's put in place, when these cases start coming to the court, and as they get appealed and go up, we will actually start establishing precedent and start defining what obscenity is in Tennessee, so that it becomes more clear to everyone involved, both us as citizens and business entities that are coming in to do business in Tennessee. They will know exactly what they can and can't do. But right now, we're dealing in the dark because there's no access to the courts for regular Tennesseans unless they're going through a criminal proceeding, which, as we pointed out, has just got all sorts of obstacles to overcome in order to get a criminal conviction against someone.
Okay. And the second bill, the second obscenity bill?
So 222 is dealing with the Protect Tennessee Minors Act. So that is the age verification law that for the pornography websites that we passed last year. That effort was led by Representative Patsy Hazelwood and Senator Becky Massey out of Knoxville. And what that did is it requires pornography sites in Tennessee, websites, to put age verification technology in the gateway when you enter into their website. In the bill that they had, I had a similar bill last year. Theirs was focused on the criminal portions and charges for not uh, complying with that statute. Mine had a lot more of the civil part in it as well, which again, I'm trying to put the power into the people and also give the attorney general some ability to do some injunctive relief and things of that nature. And so this bill 222 will add to what we've already passed, add some additional civil rights of action, also add some authority for the power for the attorney general to go after some of these folks and get some injunctive relief as well. It creates the ability to create a class action lawsuit as well.
Okay. Okay. Were there any other?
So once again, yeah, we're just trying to make it very difficult for these folks to do business in Tennessee.
Okay. Were there any other obscenity or school-related bills that you're working on?
The school related, no. I mean, those are the two main obscenity bills that I've got working on this year. The only other school bill I've got is a remote testing bill that deals with some of our school systems, in particular our rural school systems that are still doing remote learning. When they conduct their TCAP testings and things like that, they're having to bring these kids into the school system, have people there to proctor the test, create space where they can do it. And so I've got a bill that I've been working with the department on to try to make it where we can also do some remote testing for those folks, be able to proctor those exams without having to totally upstage what's going on in the school buildings in order to make accommodations for those folks.
Okay. Now, don't you have a joint resolution in reference to homeschooling? I saw that.
I do, yeah. So trying to do a constitutional amendment, which obviously is a long process, but we're starting the journey on trying to enshrine the right to homeschool your children in our state constitution. I've been working with HSLDA and also THEA, the state and the national level main homeschool organizations on trying to get this language, and both are on board. Both have vetted what we're doing, and we would be the first state in order to do that, to take the step to enshrine a parent's right to home educate their children free of any infringement or oversight from the state. And so I'm excited about it, looking forward to having some good conversations about it. And I think it's timely with what we just did in the special session when we were so focused on educational freedom and parental choice. I think, this is now is the time for us to have this conversation about homeschooling. If we are truly committed to creating educational freedom for all families, whatever that choice may be. It may be private school, it may be a different public school, but it also may be homeschooling. And so making sure that we enshrine that right in the Constitution to where no matter what laws or regulations are trying to be put on the books down the road, there's going to be an individual right that is protected by the Constitution for folks to make that decision.
So does that involve any state funds going to the homeschoolers?
There's nothing in the change to the Constitution that would involve any fund, but basically we did have a provision in there that says any type of acceptance of any funds, whether that's a stipend or a scholarship or whatever you want to call it, that it would not override or waive this constitutional right. So the same thing that any statute that we apply or pass in the legislature is going to have to stand up to the Constitution. And so if this does become an amendment and does get written in, then any laws that are pertaining to homeschooling is going to make sure that it has to comply with this right and is not infringing in any way the parents' choice to make or parents' right to make those choices.
Okay, I guess my only question on that is, so if they end up at some point in time getting money from the state, there's you know the deal. first comes the money, then comes the strings, and the whole, well,
That's
there's
right.
accountability, and well, how do we know what they're doing with it? Are they educating their kids? So I don't see how you would be able to do that. We can't do it with others. I mean, you have to account for it. How are you going to be able to? I just don't quite understand how that'll, I guess, be allowed.
Well, and that's the thing. I don't know that if this statute or if this amendment it were to pass, I think it's certainly going to severely limit the way the state would be able to deal with homeschoolers. We had that debate about the school choice bill, about the education freedom scholarship, and the homeschoolers were were sincerely worried about the strings that were going to come with that money down the road, and asked that they did not want to be included in the Education Freedom Scholarship Act. And I think if this amendment gets passed, I think that's only going to make it even more difficult down the road for the state to find some way to suck the homeschool community up into that vortex, which I think is a good thing for those. And look, the homeschool community is such a wide spectrum. I've been doing it for 22, 23 years now. My wife and I have homeschooled all three of our children. One has graduated college, one is a junior at UT Martin, and we still have a 13-year-old eighth grader at home that we're still doing it with. And so I've seen folks that were pre-COVID homeschoolers that have very strong ideological reasons why they do it, whether it's religious reasons, or just don't trust the government, or they want to have more control over what it is their kids are learning and how they're learning it. But then you also have the post-COVID folks that are just coming to homeschooling out of reaction to what experiences they've gone to, or things that are going on in their school system now that they just can't take it anymore, and they're pulling their kids out. They don't necessarily have the same aversion to being involved in state funding as some of the folks that have been doing it for a long time. And so, I don't know that there's a way to marry those different viewpoints. But I think a constitutional amendment that does make sure that the state cannot abridge or infringe a parent's right to choose how they educate their children at home, and the decisions that they make, is the only way to fully protect that right going forward for generations to come.
Okay, so you've been there and done that, literally.
For a long time now.
Yeah. One question, and I'm just curious. We didn't homeschool, but I'm certainly not against homeschooling. And, hats off to people that do it.
Right.
So state standards. I mean, I'm assuming that state standards still currently apply to homeschoolers?
It all depends upon the type of homeschool that you are. Some folks are independent homeschoolers, meaning they're doing this independent of any type of umbrella or anything along those lines. Then you have folks that are umbrellaing under church-related schools. They don't have to do the testing. None of my kids have ever had to do any type of standardized testing or anything along those lines, but they still have to pass, have an ACT score that gets them qualified to get into a college of their choice. And fortunately, if you look at statistics from homeschool kids versus public school kids, the ACT scores, college entrance exams, those numbers are at or higher generally on average than their public school counterparts.
And, I read this this was way back during the Common Core days, I believe, reading about all of the people who graduate from public schools, and then when they go to college, almost all of them have to take remedial something. And I'm not throwing stones. Had I gone to college right out of high school, I would have had to have taken remedial something that I didn't pay attention to in high school. But it's there, and to me, I mean, even if you look at the functionality of a lot of the kids that come out of schools today, out of the public schools, good Lord, go to a cashier and try to get them to make change. I mean, some of the basic skills are not there.
Well, I think again, you've got a wide spectrum of students in the public schools. Some are doing fantastic. Some kids are coming out of public schools now with dual enrollment, with a large number of credit hours already. I mean, they're halfway through their freshman year before they ever step foot onto any type of college campus. And then you've got others that, as you say, have several semesters of some catch-up work that they need to do, and whether that be math or English, in order to get themselves up to the freshman level. And I think that's always going to be the case. You know, the biggest challenge I think to our public school system is trying to be everything to all people, and you know, part of this comes back to the way I was raised. You know, my mother, I was the youngest of four with a single mom. And my mom's famous saying was, "It's your life. You can mess it up if you want to." You know, it doesn't make her any difference. And so there's some personal responsibility that has to come along with this as well. The students have their own personal responsibility, but also the parents that are responsible to make sure that their kids are doing what's necessary to get them prepared. And not everybody's doing that. And that reflects with across the board with some of our graduates and where they are whenever they do get out. So, you know, our teachers and our school systems get blamed for a lot of things, but we all have a little bit of responsibility for what's going on in our public schools right now. It's not just their fault. There's a lot to be said about what's going on at home as well.
Yeah, I've got a few friends who are teachers, so I've heard all the horror stories about the kids, and but to me, that's, you know, I remember when they did the No Child Left Behind, and everybody was complaining because, okay, now we're going to put everybody in there, even these kids with severe disabilities, this, that, and the other, and we're going to expect the same result. And I'm like, you know,
Right.
and I know I'm probably going to make a lot of people mad, but I'm pretty good at that. Some of those people don't need to be in the same classroom with other kids. And and especially if they're disruptive. If you've got a disruptive kid, they don't have a right to disrupt the class for everybody else. And I don't know why we haven't, you know, there was so much complaining at the time. I don't know why we haven't gone back and re-looked at that issue, because I hear that from a lot of people that, you know, even at the younger ages, the lower grades, that you can have a child that's disruptive, nothing can be done, and that hurts everybody. And it seems to me like that would help a lot. You know, we unfortunately, because of different reasons, not all kids belong in the same classroom with the other kids.
Well, it's funny, you know, we've kind of had that same experience with the legislature, that sometimes you have some that are disruptive and you have to ask them to leave in order for the rest of us to be able to move on with business. So I'd say a classroom is no different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's all you have on education. We talked about the governor's bill. There's at least, I think there's one you're working on that's listed in reference to illegal immigration. I think there's another one you're still working on. Whichever one you can talk about, let's go with that.
Yeah, I have two that one's in concept still that I'm trying to figure out, and that's dealing with temp agencies and some of their requirements on E-Verify and how that is not necessarily being monitored properly. So I'm still trying to sort through some of that. But the main one that I have that is online now that you can already see is a bill that creates two new criminal provisions, or two new criminal offenses, one for human smuggling and one for abetting or harboring illegal aliens. So right now we have laws on the books that deal with human trafficking, but human smuggling is a different deal. And so you've got these coyotes that are profiting off of taking large numbers of people into the country, and then once they get them into the country, they put them in box trucks and they ship them all over the country from coast to coast. And right now in Tennessee, we don't have an exact criminal provision that deals with that. And then we also don't have anything that we can charge someone with who is knowingly and intentionally harboring illegal aliens from law enforcement, folks that we know that law enforcement is looking for, criminals that are not here legally, that have probably committed some other crime, and they're being protected, or they're not being turned in. And so this is going to create a provision under law where our law enforcement and district attorneys have the ability to go after these folks. And again, we're just trying to make it an inhospitable place for folks that are violating the laws that are already on the books.
Good, because I think it was last summer, I remember June or July time frame, there was a bus And granted, the Biden administration was leading the invasion, and of course,
Right.
but they were on. Everybody heard stories about buses, but this was a bus, I think, that came into maybe Union City or somewhere in West Tennessee, and it was seen in Union City, seen in another big city in that area, and nobody spoke English. We know what it was. The police came by, but they really didn't have any. They didn't have anything they could do, I guess.
Right.
And granted, if the federal government is actually trying to stop that, it makes it a whole lot easier. I mean, I think now if we saw that now, then we could, call up ICE and say, hey, look, we need you to come and check this out. But will your bill deal with those types of things? Or let's just say a bus was found, was pulled over, and we realized somehow, hey, because I think that one had tags from Mexico or whatever. Is there a way that law enforcement can at least investigate that and contact ICE or whoever to verify whether or not the people are legal?
Yeah, so in this situation that you're talking about, I even had some folks reach out to me, I think 2 summers ago, that a bus was dropping off folks in Hickman County from, parts unknown. And so let's say a situation like that were to occur, law enforcement encounters this type of trafficking or smuggling of folks into our state that are all here illegally, that don't have documentation, not supposed to be here. What they would be able to do if this bill passes is then take the driver of that vehicle into custody, have them charged with a crime of smuggling illegal aliens into our state or through our state. And again, that hopefully is going to deter some folks whenever they get a choice of if they coming up I-55, whether or not they're going to take 40 west or keep going 55 north somewhere else. Right. That maybe they think twice about hanging a right and hanging out in Tennessee.
Yeah, we definitely got to make them unwelcome here. Granted, just having a new administration, I mean, that's making a world of difference. But we've already got a lot of them over here, so it's not like they're not going to be trafficked to other places.
Well, and that's what I think we're seeing too. Is now it's not necessarily the folks that are coming into the country anew. Right. It's folks that are already here, and they're just being moved around like little, a shell game. We're moving them around from state to state so that maybe it's harder for ICE to find them. And look, there are NGOs and Soros-funded folks that are doing these types of organizations that are actually doing these things, and those are the folks that we're trying to target. We're not going after necessarily the illegal immigrants themselves. They're being exploited just like others. We want to go to the folks that are making, again, trying to make money off of this, making a commercial enterprise out of it, or making it more difficult for ICE to do their job.
Right. Well, a few years ago, granted this was during the Biden administration, but our state, and this is, you were, I don't even think you were a freshman, I don't think you were even in the legislature when this passed. Our state gave $7.2 million to Catholic charities, knowing that Catholic charities, their big thing is refugee resettlement, which is legal but a problem. And they were also involved with, at that time, helping the UACs, the unaccompanied children. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we gave them $7.2 million. And
we're seeing all the USAID money that's coming out now, too, that's going to Catholic charities and other organizations like that. We're seeing how big this net is. And it was just a gigantic web that we're trying to figure out different ways that we can attack it. And I think this is one way that Tennessee can try to help in overcoming this issue that's overwhelmed us all.
Yeah. Hopefully the budget, and I guess they vote on that towards the end of session, correct?
I just got my budget book today.
Oh, good Lord.
So everybody wants to know how the budget works. All 60 billion of it right there. So we just got presented that tonight. We had the State of the State address by the governor in the chamber tonight. That's part of the reason why it took me a few extra minutes to get home and jump on here with you. 60
billion. That thing has gone up steadily. I think it was mid 30s, high 30s when Bill Lee took over. Now it's at 60.
60 billion.
I'm concerned too, even though I'm confident that at the federal level, the Trump administration is going to do everything they can do. Now, I don't expect a response from you, but I don't trust the Lee administration, okay? And I don't know that our budget gets the hard look it should. I want to make sure, I hope that none of our tax dollars are going to go to any NGOs that are going to help illegals in any way, shape, or form. I mean, obviously they're not going to be blatant about it like they were giving $7.2 million to Catholic Charities. But I just hope you guys will really take a look at the budget, because number one, it's constantly going up, way more than it should by just inflation, okay? And I just hate the thought that we're going to be funding some organization that's actually undercutting our state when it comes to illegals.
Well, I will say this, in the special session, one thing that we did do that the Trump administration directly asked several states to put in place was create an immigration department that's going to help and assist the Trump administration with what they're doing with ICE and the deportation that they're trying to do on a massive scale. And so we are spending some money in the state of Tennessee in order to support that effort. And we're going to have grant monies that are going to be going out to the locals to provide not only equipment, but also training and hopefully give them the ability to hire as they need folks and manpower to help assist with this. So Tennessee is making a commitment, and that the Lee administration is supporting that. So that is a positive. And look, with every budget, and certainly when you're dealing with $60 billion budget, it hopefully will get a very thorough look over the next several months, and there'll be some changes. Obviously, the way we talk about it in the legislature is this is the governor's budget. The budget that we pass will be our budget. So this is his initial go of, hey, here are the things that are my priorities and what I'm interested in. And so now we've got the Senate and the House will take their knife to it, so to speak, and start carving it up a little bit. And then we'll all reach, hopefully, an agreement at the end, and that either we're all happy with or we're all upset about, one way or the other. Right. But there's always going to be things in the budget that we like and some things that we don't like. Just like in the special session. I voted in favor of the appropriation portion, which is like passing the budget for the special session, even though it had the money in there for the education scholarships. Because
you had to get the other stuff through. Yeah.
That's right, because I had to vote for it in order to get the immigration and also to get the flood stuff. And so the same thing will happen at the end of this session when we get into April and we start working on the budget. There are going to be dozens of bills that I voted against that still pass that are going to get funded in the budget. And so I'm not going to be able to vote no on the budget because those things are in there. So, that fight was already fought and lost. And so now we're just going to have to go ahead and fund what has passed and make sure that we're taking care of Tennessee as best we can.
Right. One thing, and this precedes the Lee administration, and I don't know what the numbers, I'm sure that budget probably tells you somewhere the percentage of how much we rely on federal funding. It's been historically over the last several years approximately 40%.
Yeah,
that's a huge amount.
I hear that 40% number, and that's actually going to change quite a bit. You're going to see more an increase in state funding and a decrease in federal funding, not only this year, but over the next couple of years, because those COVID monies are going away. So I think it's something to the tune of $8 billion over the next 3 years that will go away in federal funding. So that number will shift a little bit and maybe get a little bit back to a more sustainable plan going forward.
That 40% that I quoted you, I've heard that well before COVID. I heard that 10, 12 years ago from some of the legislators up there. So I think, I won't say it's always been exactly 40%, 36, 40, whatever, in that range. My point is that's an awful lot of reliance on the federal government. And
I agree.
I think there needs to be, even though we're hoping things get better at the federal level, that's too much reliance on the federal government. And we need to probably have a goal of every year reducing by a few percentage points. Okay, I know you can't go cold turkey. There's no way to go cold turkey.
Right.
Unless we have a financial crash, then we're going to go cold turkey. But hey, 5%, 7%, whatever. cut it a year and just plan on that, because we don't need to be that reliant on the federal government, especially if we were to have some sort of crash, because then you're really going to be hurting.
Well, let's see what happens with the Department of Education under this Trump administration. There's certainly a lot of smoke that would indicate that maybe there's some fire there. So we will see how that changes things, and then what effect that has on our state budgets as well.
Okay. Well, hey, any other bills you want to talk about, or any closing thoughts? I do appreciate your time.
You caught most of the highlights. I would encourage everybody to go to capitol.tn.gov. You can look up every member of the House, and all of us have our bill list there. You can click on bills and see everything we've got. I got a lot of good things moving this year that I think are going to be exciting for folks that are on the conservative side of the aisle. The one local thing I will throw out there that's important to me and important to the folks in Hickman County that I represent is a Duck River bill that seeks to add all of the stretch of the Duck River that's inside the boundaries of Hickman County in the Class 2 Scenic Waterway designation, which is important for us. Hickman County is the 11th largest land-based county in the state, but it only has 22,000 people. It's very rural, it's very pastoral, agricultural, and we like it that way down here. And so the folks are trying to get this passed to protect the river and the major tributaries that go into it, so that we can kind of get ahead of this Middle Tennessee growth that we know is coming eventually our way. And so preserve as much of that feel that we've enjoyed growing up, so that future generations will still be able to see and enjoy the river the same way that we have.
Sounds good. And I know there's concern about the Duck River. Matter of fact, somebody's got a bill that would allow a landfill within a couple of miles. I can't remember the details.
Yeah,
on
I think that's Chairman Todd's bill that seeks to change the rules under the Class 2 Scenic Waterway. Right now, there would be a 2-mile buffer that a new landfill would have to be at least 2 miles away from the edge of a Class 2 Scenic Waterway. And so I'm not sure where that came from. I'm sure there's something that's going on upstream, probably in Murray County or back up toward Bedford or something along those lines. But I haven't talked to him yet about that and to know what the genesis of that bill is.
So do you know what the buffer is now?
It's 2 miles right now.
Oh, and they want to move it within the 2 mile.
Yeah, I think his bill is seeking to do away with the 2-mile buffer. So in theory, a new landfill could be approved right next to a Class 2 Scenic Waterway.
Wow. I'm going to find out some more about that. I'll have to give him a call.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I haven't had an opportunity to talk to him about it in detail, but I'm sure if I know Chairman Todd, the way as well as I think I do, there's always a method to his madness. I'm sure he's got a reason for what he's trying to accomplish.
Yeah, he's a smart guy, and he's used, we don't agree on everything, but we agree on quite a bit. And he's got an environmental-based business, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
So
that's right.
There's got to be, I got to find out the details on that one. Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate your time, appreciate what you do, and thanks for coming on. Definitely have you back in the future.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You have a good night. I'll have some event announcements and information about our guests next week in just a few minutes. I want to thank you all for taking the time to watch our program tonight. Please be sure to hit the like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell, so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. Check out our audio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, teeninformer.com. Please find and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And the nullification bill will be up again this year. It's House Bill 0441 by Halsey and Senate Bill 0479 by Senator Bowling. Not scheduled yet, but probably get a schedule this week, I imagine, at least for one of those two versions. And if you want more information, visit tncss.weebly.com for more information on nullification, 10th Amendment in general, and sign up for the Substack to get the latest updates on the legislation. Next week, our guest will be Professor Jeffrey Adcott from St. Mary's University in Texas. He will be here to discuss his books about Union terror tactics during the Civil War and the Confederate response. Tune in for some real history. thanks. That's it for now, and thanks for joining us. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.